Thank you all for being here. We are here to discuss two completely different, but both important issues. The first one is that the District Attorney's Office, through the good work of Assistant DA Brian Collins, has filed a motion to revoke the bail of Joshua Macias. Some of you may remember Mr. Macias at a time when Philadelphia was trying to count the vote in the presidential election. He and another man, Antonio Lamata, drove up from Virginia, got out of a Humvee. Each of them had a handgun on their person and went in the direction of where the votes were being counted. Back in the Humvee was an AR-15 with 117 rounds. They were arrested because what they did was illegal. They were illegally possessing firearms. They faced a number of charges, including attempted interference with primaries and elections. They got a bail that was less than we liked, and went to the insurrection. Well, it's getting worse, and Mr. Collins is here to explain to you how it got worse. We have yet another direct violation of the conditions of bail on the part of Mr. Macias, whose conduct must be contextualized within the reality that we are now looking at close to 700 people who have been charged with serious crimes around the insurrection. We have a number of them who have been convicted and are going to jail for what is, in layman's talk, treason. We have another violation, and therefore we have filed a motion to revoke the bail of Joshua Macias. Once again, cash bail has failed us. Mr. Brian Collins will be addressing that and giving you all the specifics shortly. The second issue that we have, and ADA Vincent Corrigan, who is with us right here, will be addressing that one, is that we have today announced the arrest and arraignment of Philadelphia police officer Daniel Levitt for his role in an illegal car search. You may recall that in December, the Philadelphia Police Department initiated its own audit of a significant number of car stops and arrests. During that process, they identified several that they wanted to send to us, and they sent them to us for our review. This is one in which a careful analysis of the evidence reveals not only that there was problematic policing, but that there were crimes involved. And for that reason, we are announcing today the arrest for what is essentially untruthfulness, serial untruthfulness in official capacities, not limited to but including perjury, by Officer Levitt. And Mr. Corrigan will be addressing those points. So without further ado, I'm going to call up Mr. Collins, and then I'm going to ask Mr. Corrigan to come forward right afterward. After they have both concluded, we will take questions. Mr. Collins.
Good afternoon. What we have here is that we filed this motion because not just one, but two judges in this case involving Mr. Macias placed on him conditions of his release for bail where he was not to post on social media, he was not to attend rallies, he was not to be involved in social media postings in any capacity. We've had since then a series of violations of both orders by Mr. Macias, a series of postings on social media involving him, as well as postings on social media showing him attending rallies, both in violation of his conditions of bail. Most recently, the rallies that he attended, which are shown through the social media postings, include a rally in D.C., which is modeled after the so-called trucker protests that recently happened in Canada, which effectively shut down Ottawa for a period of days or weeks. And so given that activity, given that this has been repeated over several postings, and that not just one but two judges had imposed these conditions on him, we felt at this point in time it was necessary to bring a motion to bring this to the court's attention and show that the court's orders had been violated.
What did he say in these postings?
If we may, we're going to do the questions at the end.
Oh, okay,
Please
sorry.
hold that. Thank you.
I thought he was
Sure.
going to speak. Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. All right. Eddie?
All right, good afternoon. My name is Vincent Corrigan. I'm here to address the arrest, or more correctly, surrender of Daniel Levitt. As the district attorney said, as a result of changes in the law imposed upon us by the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia Police Department had to retrain the police on how to behave when they were conducting motor vehicle stops. After that training took place, the PPD conducted an audit of a random selection of those kinds of cases, several hundred. After they did that, they sent to us a number of cases about which they were uncomfortable and did not, if the people who had been arrested were in custody, the PPD felt they probably should not be, and we should take action on those cases. Further investigation revealed that in this particular instance, 3 police officers conducted a traffic stop for a vehicle allegedly going through a stop sign. The vehicle was stopped on some open ground. It was a van, so they couldn't see over from side to side. Officer Levitt is on one side, 2 other officers are on the other side. At some point in the process, which took about 20-30 minutes altogether, Officer Levitt had the passenger of the vehicle ordered to get out of the vehicle, and he then proceeded to conduct a search of the vehicle, and he claimed that he saw a gun in plain view as a result of that search, that it was sticking out of an unzipped bag. There's clear evidence that the bag that he claimed to have recovered the gun from, was in fact zipped, and there was no legal basis for conducting the search of the van at all. It had simply allegedly gone through a stop sign. That doesn't get you the right to search a van, certainly not under the case law as it is now. So as a result of the investigation, the officer then filled out police paperwork, which was clearly false, and he then testified under oath at a preliminary hearing for the gentleman who was arrested as a result of this activity, which had him held for court, and the case was proceeding to trial. That gentleman had no record at all, never been arrested in Philadelphia. So as a result of the officer's conduct, that case was withdrawn, and instead he is now a defendant. And he surrendered himself, and so as we were discussing bail, he's released on his own recognizance, because he's going to appear in court. He appeared to surrender this morning.
All right, I anticipate the first question is going to be about what were the postings?
Let's just start with the officer. So, on the officer with the gun, what proof did you have that it was it? How did you guys come to that conclusion?
I don't really want to comment on the detail.
The audio just dropped, like before the question was over, the audio just...
Okay, well, just let me know when it's back.
Like a screeching halt.
Are we good?
No, not yet.
Okay. Did I step on something?
There we go.
It was your magnetic personality.
If there was no carpeting here over the wiring, I would have known to step over it. I don't want to get too deep into the details because we were before the case has even been begun to be litigated. But the officers were all wearing body cameras, and the body cameras see what they see.
What do we know about that gun? Was it anything illegal about the gun or anything of that sort?
The comments, it was just a gun, a relatively new gun, legally purchased.
You said legally or illegally?
No, legally purchased. Yes.
It's just a sort of regular gun, not a ghost gun of some sort or something?
No, it was a gun with a serial number. Ghost guns have no serial number.
And was that gun owned by anyone involved in the traffic stop?
Yes.
Okay, just asking. And then, on what charges is that officer facing?
He's charged with perjury for lying under oath and knowing about it. False reports to authorities for falsifying police paperwork about what he did, and official oppression for conducting a search and arrest without legal justification.
What's the status of the other cases? You said there were several cases.
Uh,
You said over?
Those investigations are ongoing as far as I know.
How many are there?
I am not sure.
This is the first arrest as a result of that audit?
Yes.
Okay. And when was the case against the person who was charged withdrawn? And, I mean, was this person like wrongly incarcerated for a period of time? What happened in the meantime?
Because he'd never been arrested before, he was not incarcerated at all as a result of, except for the process that you go through to be processed in an arrest, which normally takes about 24 hours or so. So he was not held in custody. The incident itself, when he was arrested, happened in April last year. The audit was of I'm not exactly sure what the PPD parameters were. They did it over the summer, I believe, and at the end of last year they approached us about several of the cases. This particular case was withdrawn in December, I think.
Did this officer Levitt have any, are you aware of any prior disciplinary action with the police department or anything of that sort?
I don't, and we don't review prior disciplinary action as a component to these investigations. I don't think it's appropriate to look at that sort of thing. So I actually do not know right now what his prior police discipline is, if any.
And do you know when his next court hearing would be?
No, that hasn't happened as part of the process yet, and we're not consulted as to when that will be. It will just be the first available date, whenever that is. It'll probably be in a couple of weeks, I imagine.
When did he surrender?
This morning.
And where did he surrender?
I know who he surrendered to. I don't know actually where he surrendered for sure.
What's
But
the status
probably internal affairs. But I do not know for sure.
You said there were multiple officers on that stop. There were 3 officers. You said at one point he was on one side, and 2 officers were on the other.
There were eventually more than 3, but there were 3.
Okay. So
There
what
were about 5 of them altogether.
are those officers among the other investigations that you're doing in connection?
No.
With this, no. Okay. So you do not believe they did anything. You have no information that they did anything improper.
No.
And would it be accurate to say, so is the perjury charge specifically with regard to the officer's statement that the bag was open and the gun was sticking out, but you have evidence suggesting it was
He
closed?
testified in court under oath at a preliminary hearing. So the perjury count relates to his testimony under oath. Okay?
Are there any other questions?
On the
other case?
on the Macias case, what platform did he do it on, and what did he actually do?
So there are a number of them, so it's a little bit hard to recount them all, but we're essentially talking about posts from Facebook and Twitter from a couple of different accounts. They're going through Veterans for America First and Veterans for Trump, if I remember the names correctly. And the posts involved on the one, and also a social media site that appears to have been homemade through one of those organizations. I think it's Veterans for America First. Their website also is hosting their own social media page. So on that page as well, there were some postings. The postings were attempts to organize a trucker protest similar to the one up in Canada, down here in the United States. And then he also had a number of posts where he's promoting different candidates for office or attending rallies for those candidates, one of whom is noteworthy for running for office in Virginia and calling for the execution of everybody who was involved in Joe Biden's election in 2020.
When was the rally that he attended in DC?
The DC rally was March 8th.
And is there
Or that was the date of the post.
That was the date of the post?
Right, that was the date of the post.
But do you believe he attended that day?
I believe it's a Facebook Live video.
So is there a video showing him at the rally, or you believe it was filmed by him?
So it's the latter. Filmed by him, and what we have is his voice on the video saying, "This is JM coming to you from this protest."
For the purposes of the bail conditions, is there any difference between social media and a website?
I think that's a legal question that we'd have to have a judge answer. Because obviously social media is a website. It's a website that you use for a certain specific purpose to communicate amongst a group of people. And it's our position that anything that's a platform that allows you to reach a number of people should be considered a social media site.
When is the judge expected to hear this motion to him?
The hearing is currently scheduled for next Wednesday.
Were there any indications, either because he said so or just because he was stopped or anything, for any reason, was there any indication that he had any weapons at that particular rally that you were talking about, or at any others you named?
I don't have any information about that at the moment, no.
Were his weapons confiscated from the first time he was arrested here?
Yes.
Were they ever returned?
Not to my knowledge.
Was your concern just that he was violating specific terms, or do you believe that he posed some sort of danger?
Well, obviously it's both, because we asked for him to be held without bail in the first instance because of the conduct that we saw that we arrested him for. He came to Philadelphia with his co-conspirator. They were armed. They came with the intention to interfere with the election, and then subsequent to that, they both went to Washington, D.C. on January 6th to participate in the Capitol insurrection. So clearly it's our position that they're involved in some dangerous extremist activities, and then both judges in municipal court and common pleas specifically put this condition on the bail to prevent him from continuing to participate in those types of activities that led to things like what happened on January 6th of 2021. So it's really both. It's to vindicate the authority of the court because the court put out a condition, and also that we believe that he's involved in dangerous activity.
Does he have any federal charges?
Not that I'm aware of at the moment.
Is he in custody now?
No, he's out on bail at the moment, yes.
I'm sorry, I'm going back to the
Okay,
gun
sure.
case.
Vinny, come on
I
up.
just want to make sure I got the facts right. The gentleman who was arrested for the gun violation, was he the driver?
No.
He was a passenger.
Yes.
And how many people were in that car during that stop?
It was a van, and there were two.
Okay. I apologize.
I have one more question on Macias, if you have a moment.
Sure.
How'd you find out about the post?
So it came from a couple of different sources. It's all through open source investigation. Some of it came from some an independent investigator who sent us the information, and some of it also came through BuzzFeed reporter that contacted our office.
And there's no request to revoke Mr. Lamanna's bail at this time. It's just Macias.
That's correct, because we don't have any information that he's done anything to violate the conditions at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Is that it?
If I may, there's just a couple points I want to make, and if there are any final questions, we'll entertain them as well. So obviously the case involving Mr. Levitt raises a number of the issues we've been talking about for some time in terms of car stops. As you may be aware from various sources, including, for example, the 100 shooter report, as it's called, done by City Council, what came after stop and frisk, much of it illegal, was a whole lot of car stops and a whole lot of car searches that were carried out without a warrant. That was, at one point, considered permissible under the law in Pennsylvania, but all of that changed. And when it changed, because an appellate court decided that was not okay anymore, that meant that those prior car searches, but also future car searches, were illegal. We are in a situation where what we have is a lot of gun cases, and they're not all going to make it to the finish line because the searches were illegal. Obviously, the job of the police department is not just to harvest guns. They are not farming. The job of the police department is to get guns in compliance with the United States Constitution, the Pennsylvania Constitution, the law, and to do so in a way so that evidence is admissible and the case is strong enough that we can achieve a conviction. Sometimes you hear this, we're going to get guns off the street, get guns off the street, get guns off the street. Well, how about getting a conviction? And this, in many ways, raises exactly that issue, which is you have to have compliance with constitutional requirements, not lying to get around them, but actual compliance with constitutional requirements, or the case is dead in the water. This case is dead in the water, and it's dead in the water because of what this police officer did. So the ramifications here, including a further erosion of public trust in the truthfulness and honesty of the system, the ramifications here are big. Ramifications are that this gun case will never succeed, specifically because of this conduct, and the implication of an officer deliberately choosing deception over compliance with the Constitution should not be underestimated. It says something about what needs to change. I do want to give a lot of credit to the commissioner for doing the audit, for referring this to us, for being properly concerned about the integrity of activity of some of the officers in the police department, because that's the only way things get better, and that's the only way things change.
So the original violation, though, he wasn't allowed to have a gun in the car, right? He wasn't allowed to be.
He did not have a permit to carry. This is someone who, if he had gone through the process of obtaining a permit to carry, would not have been committing any sort of a violation. Now, with reference to the Macias case, I want to, I know there's been the passage of time, but I just want to remind all of you as you think about whether or not dangerousness is really in play here. What occurred is these two men drove up from Virginia in a red-hot hurry in a military-looking vehicle with other equipment that looked as if it were military, with text back and forth of a sort of a military nature. Mr. Macias, at one point, was running a veterans organization that was supporting the other candidate, Donald Trump. So there was all kinds of military talk and trappings and hats and all this stuff going on, QAnon hats inside of that vehicle, just one more reflection of their extremism and, frankly, their belief in a fictitious world. That was going on. When I received, and I did personally receive a call from the head of the FBI that they knew these men were coming to Philadelphia. The men were stopped by Philadelphia police. It wasn't just that they had guns on their hips, guns that they knew they could not have, and we know that because they did an internet search to see if it was legal to carry a gun. They found out it wasn't, but they did it anyway. And they did it in the same block where the entry is to the convention center to count all these votes. They did not come up here to hunt pigeons. They came up here with loaded weapons to get as close as they could and do who knows what at a place where votes were being counted in a Democratic election. Back in the vehicle is an AR-15 with 117 rounds, a couple of other silly things like swords. But that's who they were. So then they get out on bail, and their first stop is outside the U.S. Capitol, where we have them on video. What they're doing outside of the Capitol is speechifying and using walkie-talkies. Now, why are we using walkie-talkies? Why would somebody be using walkie-talkies when the insurrection is going on? It is my information. Let me just make sure I'm allowed to say this. Yeah, all right. LaMotta went inside the Capitol. He went inside the Capitol on bail from what happened here. Just so we're all clear, that's what they think is okay to do. There is a gallows erected outside of the Capitol. People are chanting, "Kill Mike Pence." We have since that time seen the deaths of 5 law enforcement officers, one of them killed by having a fire extinguisher thrown at his head, 4 others who committed suicide. law enforcement officer being crushed in the doorway. We remember all this, but it's been a minute, right? So at that time, we go and we try to get them locked up, which is where they should have been in the first place. We fail. And here we have it yet again. Yet again. We're at a point where almost 700 people have been charged with crimes, some of them very serious crimes. We're at a point where the head of the Oath Keepers has now been charged with incredibly serious crimes. We don't know how close this actually gets to a very serious attempt to undo democracy in the United States. And all of this is happening in a climate where we have what's occurring between Russia and Ukraine occurring, right? And a worldwide assault on democracy, essentially. And then we have this too. We have direct, specific violations of the conditions of bail. For what purpose? Well, once again, for the same purpose, to advocate for a candidate who wants to execute everybody involved in getting Biden elected. These are dangerous people. They are doing dangerous things with dangerous people. They should be locked up. That's the bottom line. They should have been locked up from jump. But I just want to be clear. This is not like, well, maybe they're a little dangerous or they did something technical. These are dangerous people. They do dangerous stuff. Their friends are dangerous.
So you said the other guy, Lombardo, I think, went inside the Capitol. Why was that not something that you thought triggered asking for bail to be revoked?
We did.
You did for that one?
Yes.
Right? Is that right? Yeah, that was actually filed some time ago.
Okay, all right.
On Officer Levitt, can you guys spell his name? Will you be releasing this photo?
PPD put something out.
L-E-V-I-T-T.
L-E-V-I-T-T.
His first name is Daniel.
I don't know if they put something out on it.
I'm sorry, would you mind spelling?
It's Daniel Levitt, L-E-V-I-T-T.
And Daniel spelled just normal.
Normal way, yeah. All right. If there are no further questions, thank you very much. We really appreciate your attention.